The gap is not between what students know and what they don't know. The gap is between knowledge and responsibility. Financial literacy that stays theoretical does not build financially mature students. I have seen students who have been able to name the difference between a need and a want in a workshop, and later impulse buy in the school canteen a couple of minutes later, and hypothetical lessons create hypothetical behavior. Every year, thousands of students in Singapore graduate with excellent results. And every year, the same question quietly follows them out the gate. Are they actually ready? I'm Ernest Tan. This is Beyond the Report Card. Let's go beyond. Financial literacy that stays theoretical does not build financially mature students. It builds students who can explain financial ideas and then make the same poor decisions anyway. I have seen students who have been able to name the difference between a need and a want in a workshop, and later impulse buy in the school canteen a couple of minutes later. The gap is not between what students know and what they don't know. The gap is between knowledge and responsibility. Before we go further, if you're finding this very useful, do hit the like and subscribe button down below. I put out content like this every week to help people like you, school leaders, educators, and parents who are very serious about building these skills, these knowledge, and these attitudes for the next generation. It helps more people like you in your position to find the work that I do. Schools are doing everything right at the content level, but there is a piece that makes it stick. And without it, no amount of financial content will change that behavior. Responsibility is not a bonus feature in a financial education program. It is the mechanism. Today, I want to give you a three-part framework I call the theory versus responsibility gap. And by the end of this video, you will have a clear picture of what is missing and what to build instead. In over 20 years of working with schools and in schools across Singapore, I have seen this pattern repeat consistently. Schools invest real time in financial education. The content is often solid, yet the behavior doesn't change. That isn't an effort problem. It is a design problem. Schools are treating financial education as a content delivery, not a formation. At Leven Academy, we use the Leven learning cycle. Reflection, insight, behavior, consequence. When behavior and consequence are removed from the learning loop, students exit with knowledge that they cannot translate into wise choices outside the classroom. I remember one student very clearly. During the workshop, he could articulate the difference between good debt and bad debt. He was able to explain budgeting and describe responsible credit card use. All of it correct, all of it very fluent. Then we moved to the scenario activity. And that was where he made decisions that were the complete opposite of everything that he was able to say verbally. The end of that activity, he was in a financially dire situation. That moment itself crystallized something for myself. Correct knowledge doesn't automatically translate into positive outcomes when real decisions are required. The lesson had formed his vocabulary. It didn't form his judgment. The question is not, did your student understand the content? The real question is, did they carry the real responsibility over to a real decision with a real consequence? If the answer is no, the lesson stopped at knowledge. Today, I'm speaking specifically to school leaders, head of departments, program coordinators, and anybody responsible for how youth development programs are designed. This is a conversation about program architecture, not just classroom delivery. I call this the theory versus responsibility gap, and it has three parts to it. Part 1, theory without ownership. Part 2, consequence-free financial learning. Part 3, missing accountability architecture. Let me take you through each one of them, because each reveals a different root cause. and each points to a different fix. Point 1 is the most common and the most straightforward to address: theory without ownership. A student who has never owned a decision cannot be formed by a lesson without that decision. Picture with me a secondary school financial literacy unit lesson. Budgeting is explained well. Students learn savings plans and interest rates, but at no point in time were they asked to manage any actual budget. Now, contrast that with schools that give students responsibility over a resource, a CCA fund, a class activity, allocation, a team project budget. Student conversations change. They talk about trade-offs, not just definitions. Engagement deepens when content is attached to something a student is actually responsible for. It does not require real money, it requires real ownership. And these two things are quite different. Here's the practical step. Add one ownership moment to your existing financial education unit this term. Even a structured resource allocation with a visible, non-resetting, non-helping outcome creates a very different learning for your students. Where it is, or where is it in your current program, do students actually own something, even in a tiny way? If you can't name it quickly, that itself is a gap. Ownership is point 1. Let me now move on to point 2, which is way subtler and in some ways a bit more consequential. Point 2 is where well-designed programs quietly fail. Consequence-free learning teaches students that money decisions have no weight. Without consequence, the lesson is always hypothetical, and hypothetical lessons create hypothetical behavior. So even when schools cannot use real money, they can also design exercises where the outcome is visible and that carries forward in other areas of the student's life. Let me illustrate something that I have learned as a physical education teacher when I was in a school, because the principle transfers quite directly. When I brought my students out for their PE lesson, I was very particular that they will walk outside the classroom quietly. And here's the reason why. I wanted my students to respect the other lessons which are happening inside their classrooms. I didn't want them to get disturbed. So I made my students I gave them a rather simple offer. Do cooperate with me, walk quietly when we go past the other classrooms. And when we arrive at our venue, I would offer them a chance, a couple of minutes, a very short amount of time to warm up by playing things that they wanted to play. And as a result, what I did was the outcome was tied to their own choices, their own decisions. What I noticed quite consistently was this: when students had skin in the game, they made the decisions that serve them very easily. Skew the consequence towards something that aligns with what you need as the educator. Skew the consequence that aligns with what you want for them to learn, and the outcome always naturally follows. The same principle applies in financial education. Consequence doesn't mean you got to have cash. It means a choice matters where someone is accountable and the outcome is not automatically reset. Here is a practical step. Review your existing program that you have for your students. Find one moment where the simulation resets completely. And then you ask, what would change if this decision had a visible outcome, even if it's a really small one? If the financial lesson itself could be described as risk-free, that may be exactly why it is not building the maturity that we all hope to see in our students. Consequence is point 2. Point 3 is the hardest to see from inside the system. Point 3 is a program design issue, not a delivery issue. Most financial education programs have no accountability architecture within the program design itself. That is why even good sessions, good programs, good lessons leave no lasting trace. Accountability architecture means this: who is responsible for what, over what period, and with what visible outcome. Without it, students learn that decisions are reversible and inconsequential. I'm going to be honest, this is genuinely difficult to build into a one-off session. What I can tell you is what happens when we go in for a multi-session program. There was one secondary school that engaged us for a journalism program. Multiple sessions, each building on the content that was taught in the previous session. For each session, students were assigned tasks, and for the task, they would break it up to specific individuals or members within their own group. If one person didn't follow through, the entire system, the entire piece, the entire work would break down. The stakes were genuinely real. They wouldn't be able to showcase their work, which a lot of them wanted to because they put in work and effort into it, and there were points tied to their completion to it. The difference in student commitment was very visible. They were not just accountable to the trainer assigned to that particular program, they were in fact accountable to every member within their own group. Every person carried a piece that only they themselves could deliver, and they intuitively knew it. That is what accountability architecture looks like in practice. Here is the practical step. Before your next financial education session, identify one accountability moment. A decision a student must name, own, reflect on before they leave the room. That small structure changes the experience. Accountability architecture is point 3, and it's the piece that separates a good financial lesson from a genuine formation experience. So here is where we land. Financial education stays shallow when responsibility is missing from the lesson design. Theory without ownership, that equates to knowledge without formation. Consequence-free learning, that equates to hypothetical maturity and it doesn't last. There is no accountability architecture, nothing carries over. 3 practical steps. Add one ownership moment to your program this term. Reintroduce consequence into at least one simulation that you have cleverly designed. That is what makes financial education feel like financial reality. And you build one accountability check-in, a named outcome, reflection, a visible commitment before the students leave the room, they leave the program. Those 3 steps shift the experience from delivery of the program to the formation of habits, formation of attitudes, that takes place well beyond the classroom itself. Now, I welcome you if you wish to explore how Leven Academy approaches financial maturity formation, not just the delivery of financial literacy programs. The details are in the description below in the description box. You can reach me at ernest@levenacademy.com, or if you want to set up a Google Meet video meet with me, you can go over to our website at www.levenacademy.com/contact. You might want to watch this video on how financial literacy lessons do not change student behavior. That is the first video in this series. Financial maturity is not what students know, it is what they do when the freedom increases and the consequences become real. That is what Leven Academy is designed to build. Thank you for taking your time to watch this video, and I will see you in the next video.